Roland Willits, OMS Stories, with another old-timer, Scotty Henson.
Okay. As old Roadhog Moran says, are we on, are we on? I think I was relating our first band experience when we all quit the original man and regrouped without him because he was doing some things none of us approved of. But anyway, we started back. We were originally called the Kentucky Valley Boys. So we changed it to Kentucky Travelers with Scotty Henson as the MC. But then we found out there was a band in East Kentucky called the Kentucky Travelers. So I took ours and put New in front of it, New Kentucky Travelers. And we went on for a year like that. And then we lost that half hour. Channel 6 lost that public access channel. So we went to Bowling Green, Kentucky and played on television up there a while. And later that year got a call from a booking agent, wanted us to go overseas. And at that time, the first thing popped in my mind was Vietnam. And I said, that depends on where overseas. He said, Greenland. Greenland, I've heard of Greenland. That don't sound bad at all, Greenland. That must be nice. I said, let me talk to the guy. Oh yeah, they said, let's go, let's do it. Because it paid well, you know. And we got together, he said, they got to carry 2 girls. We didn't have any girls in our band. Bluegrass typically didn't have women back then. So I found one girl over in Missouri. Her name was Jan Gale Gines, J-I-N-E-S, I think. Her dad and mother were big fans of ours, and we had her on our TV program as a guest. So she wanted to go, and I couldn't find the second girl, and the booking agent said, I'll find you one. So he found one up in Peoria. And that too is another story. But anyway, they went with us, and we went to Thule, Greenland, and stayed the month of October in '66. And we played 3 shows a night, 6 nights a week.
Yeah, and when you say you're out in the Thules, you're out in the
You're out in the Thule. And I wouldn't take anything for the trip, but I would never go back. Under any circumstances, I would never go back. It's like being on another planet by comparison to here, where there's trees and grass and people and women. Up there, there's none of that.
You're about 500 miles from the...
500 miles from the actual North Pole. And that sounds like a long way from here to Detroit, but up there, that's very close. And there were no women except the nurses in the hospital. And they were between my size and your size and about our ages probably. So they didn't get much attention from the men up there. But that's why every band had to take 2 girls. There were 2 other bands playing at the time we got there. They kept alternating bands. Every 2 weeks a new band would come in, one would leave. Each band stayed 4 weeks. That was quite an experience playing with Eskimos on every show. They didn't understand the language, many of them didn't. And every song we did, they just laugh and holler. Even if it was a gospel song, they just applauded and laughed. They didn't know what it was, they just liked the music. But we came back from there and couldn't buy a booking around here at that point. Because, I don't know, bluegrass was experienced its first great lull. It had fallen off tremendously in the wake of rock and roll and pop country and that kind of stuff. So we went several years without doing anything. And that kind of dissolved our band right there. But we remained friends and got together. After 30 years, we finally got back together for fun.
Wow.
Just like we'd never been separated. Everybody knew his part, everybody pitched in. It was exactly like we'd never quit. After 30 years.
So great.
And now, the fiddle player and the mandolin player who became our guitar player, they both passed away. So the 3 of us still alive that was in that group. Jerry Mills played the bass, Jack Martin in Paducah played the dobro guitar, and I played the banjo. So there's just 3 of us alive, only 2 of them can play, and I can't. Jack and Jerry can still perform, they can still play. They're good music. In fact, Jack Martin went on to play with Lester Flatt on the Grand Ole Opry for a long time.
Wow.
Yeah, he did. He was a great dobro player. Dobro is acoustic steel guitar.
Oh, that's really sounds nice.
Yeah. And he plays that beautifully. So then after that, I got in a group over here at Benton, a bunch of friends who like to get together and play and sing. And we formed a little group called the Village Singers. The name coming from the fact that we played at the Village Inn at the State Park at Gilbertsville. We played in the Village Inn coffee shop, so we were the Village Singers. And that went on for several years, about 13 altogether. And we switched bass players in that time. And guitar once or twice. But the core group stayed the same. Howard and Judy Copeland and me. And Howard and Judy had two beautiful daughters, have two beautiful daughters. They went to Nashville, and the oldest girl, Sherry, went to work for the famous George Jones.
Oh.
Singing backup with him.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that's good. And her husband, in fact, her husband got the job initially, singing. He was a bass singer. He sang backup with George, and Sherry sang a lot of demos for other people. But they both went to work for George Jones. Laura, the other girl, she never was that interested in music. She's a beautiful girl. Her husband is kind of a, I guess you call him a contractor or something. But they're doing great. The daddy of that group, Howard Copeland, he passed away about 3 years ago. Judy still lives in Nashville. She's a wonderful singer, just a wonderful person. We just love her like she is family. And her and the two girls still live in Nashville. And their oldest daughter now, Sherry, sings with Ray Stevens.
Oh.
Her husband books Ray Stevens.
Oh.
And she sings with him, but Ray does so few shows. He's so rich. I mean, he gets $50,000 a performance. Who can afford to pay a man $50,000 to come do one show? We used to play for $350. And I do guest spots at the Opry now for a lot less than that, just for fun. I'm going to play one. I'm going to do Uncle Judd, my character, at the New Year's Eve show.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, that's fun. I love to go to the New Year's show because they have another band, Clay and the band. They do a whole band of alter egos, they call it Slick Tire and the White Sidewalls. And they play old rock and roll stuff.
Oh,
and
cool.
They'll roll their cigarettes up in their shirt sleeves and do their hair combed back in the ducktail and all that stuff. And it's just a tongue-in-cheek thing, but they do some good music. And I play a part called Buzz Murphy. I'm like their on the road announcer or whatever, and I come out and I even do silly commercials, and I can't remember what all I do during that, but it's a lot of fun. And so Barbie, I talked to her on the phone a week or two ago about something. She said,
That's
hey,
Barbie Campbell.
Yeah. She said, hey, you want to do a New Year's show? And I said, sure, that'd be fun. And so she said, well, all right, I'll put you on the list.
Oh, that sounds
so that'll
awesome.
be fun to do, yeah. I've done a bunch of them. I've seen a lot of years change on that stage.
I bet.
Yeah. I've got some really good memories of all those years I played out there. Made some wonderful friends. Some of these have become what I'd call family friends after so many years. There's a couple up in Providence, Kentucky. Tom and Dorotha Meadows is their name. They're wonderful fans at the Opry. They come practically every show. And we got to be good friends, and we go out and eat together occasionally, and we just love being together, just good friends.
Yeah, they got some real faithful followers.
They do. They have a bunch of what they call season ticket holders, season passes, that they come to all the shows, all the big name shows he had, because he brings in big names quite frequently out there. And usually he'll have them in the Carson Center in Paducah, which is a lot bigger venue than this one out here. Because it'll seat 1,800 and this will just seat 5.5 or 6.
Right, right.
So he has them down in the Carson Center, which is a beautiful building and a wonderful place to perform. They got huge stage, they got great dressing rooms, they got green rooms, they got it all. I mean, you think you walk out on that stage and look at the auditorium.
You're gonna be at our first performance of OMS Opry, right? When we create it.
Sure.
Oh, awesome! If we're either one of us are alive, we're gonna be there. and moving. We have to be alive and moving.
Oh, absolutely. I'll be able to move. I'm rapidly losing that ability, but I'm still hanging in there.
That's it. You gotta just keep hanging in there. I put that. I'm putting on my side of my RV. I'm putting Scout for Kentucky Opry.
There you go.
You saw the business card. You see the business card?
I did.
Yeah. Well, on the back of the RV is that picture. There's a picture on this side. See this picture right here. These two, the two like this are on the back of the RV, and this picture is on the side, just like that.
Really?
Yeah.
Let me put my specs back on so I can see a little better.
That's on the side of the RV. And
are you Willie Nelson or an Indian right there?
What?
Are you Willie Nelson or are you an Indian right
Am I an Indian? No, you know what? Each one of these pictures is a different life story. This one right here was that hat. See, I'm wearing that hat right here, and that's about my story about the hat, about getting my hat. This one, Terry made me a king for a day.
Yeah.
She didn't make it very long. that was a birthday. And the one back here, this one I went with my kids to Hawaii for a hula contest. I was in the middle of a whole hula group, and this one here was at my son's wedding a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. In Embarcadero at the Boogaloo Tattoo Shop, and that's where they got married. So I wore this. This is the outfit. Each one of these I wore, and I was appropriate.
Yeah, sure.
So so things change as you go through life.
That is neat.
So and now I'm into country, because country fits right into storytelling.
Sure it does.
It's a storytelling music. So
let me tell you a story. Take it with a grain of salt. But my wife and I, when we first had our first house up the road here about a mile, we had this old cat. Mangy looking thing showed up, and it wasn't friendly. It was ill. It was just useless to have around the place. And she said, "Why don't you get rid of that cat?" I said, "Well, I guess I could." So I loaded him in my truck and drove over between the lakes. And I passed by a place looked like they could take care of an animal, so I pitched him out. I thought they'll take good care of him. And I came back home. When I pulled up in my driveway, the cat was sitting in the driveway. Right here, after I take him all the way between the lakes, I get home and there he sits. I thought, for crying out loud, I'll fix you, buddy. So I took him further away, and I let him go, and I shot him dead, killed him. I thought, I got back home, he was sitting on my front porch.
The bullet hole in it?
Yeah. And didn't even have any blood on him. I thought, what in the round world, what kind of cat is this? I took him down here in the river bottoms, and I took my axe. And I laid him up on an old stump down there, and I took my axe, I chopped his head off. I threw the head in the river, I threw the body in the river, and I turned and started to walk back to my truck. I heard something splashing, and I looked back, and here comes that cat swimming across the river with his head in his mouth. I don't know if you've ever heard that one or not.
No, I haven't heard that one.
That's good.
That's when you tell up on
That's what
stage.
you call a tall tale,
Yeah,
absolutely.
you tell that up on stage.
In fact, I don't think I ever told that on stage.
Oh, is that right?
I don't think I ever
That sounds
did.
like one that would go right on stage.
It probably would, yeah. I did a routine as Uncle Judd Crowfield, and I would come out, and sometimes I'd come out and just interrupt things, or most of the time Clay would introduce me. He said, "Here he is, Uncle Judd Crowfield," and I'd come out on stage like you saw me there a while ago. That cane, the tottering along, and that cane is not a prop. I need it now, but I'd come out on stage and.
You grew into the position.
Yeah, I did. I aged into the part. I started playing that part when I was 21 years old.
Wow.
And because I tell you why. When I was 20 years old, I had my upper teeth pulled. They were bad, and I had a false plate put in. Well, I found out I could take that false plate out and act like a drunk and get a lot of laughs. And there was a truck stop out here where all the kids hung out. I didn't marry till I was 28, so I was still out there running around. And they all knew what I was up to, and they kept this old cap back in the back room of that restaurant. It was a 24-hour-a-day truck stop, and that's where we hang out. And when that place got half full of tourists in the summertime, they'd say, "Scotty, do your drunk act." And I'd go through the kitchen and through this back room and get this old hat, pull the bill on sideways, take my teeth out, and I'd go staggering down the front wall by the front windows, bouncing off the wall, grab the door, and finally get inside. And I'd look at somebody like, "Hey, I don't want to make you mad, you know what I mean?" But then I'd go into this long thing, and they thought I was drunker than a skunk. And I would do that. One time I was doing that act.
Now you got to tell me, you've never been in a bar in your life.
No. But I've seen drunks.
Yeah, you know drunks, yes.
And they can't ever look right at you. They look right by you. So I was doing that act one night, and a friend of mine walked in with her boyfriend. She was a grown woman. She was a real nice lady. And they had been out somewhere on a date and stopped by there for a cup of coffee or a piece of pie or whatever. And they were coming in the door just as I was staggering to go out the door. I'd been in there doing my thing with everybody, you know. And she met me at the door. She said, "Scotty Henson, I never thought I'd see you like this." She broke her heart. Well, I had to laugh. I said, "Mary, I'm not drunk." I said, "I'm just putting on an act." She said, "You ought to be whipped." She said, "You scared me." I had a lot of fun doing this. And my dad, like I told you, he didn't like drinking. He said, "Now, Scotty, you can be funny without acting drunk." He said, "I just don't like you going around acting drunk."
He didn't even like the act.
No, he didn't like the act. So I cleaned up the act. I started doing Uncle Judd as just a balmy old man, you know, which I am naturally anyway, a balmy old man. And like you said, over the years, I've grown into the part.
Isn't that nice?
It's a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun doing that character. I've got this. Well, you saw that outfit I had on in that tape.
Yeah, cool.
I got a little black Amish schoolboy's hat that I wear, a little straw hat, little bitty. And I take my teeth out. I got these old glasses I put on, and I always wear bib overalls because I usually wear them around here. But anyway, it's just fun to do that character. And I had a hit record in 1965 in Nashville. That was fun. That's where we got to traveling on the road, doing Opry package shows, they call them.
Oh, okay.
They'd send some Opry stars, and they needed a band to back them up. And we were a band. We weren't well known then, but we'd go and play backup for these stars who were well known, and we'd get paid. And not much, but we thought we was just doing wonderful. I mean, we would drive from here to the Gulf Coast and play a show for $25 a piece. we did it, man. And I never did make any big money playing, comparatively speaking, until we went overseas in '66. And then I made low for that period even then, but still I made $300 a week up there.
Wow.
And I sent it all home by money order. So I had it waiting for me in the bank when I got here, so I couldn't blow it up there. But over the years, I've gotten residual checks from TV stations and things in Nashville where they have rerun an old program that I was on, and they have to pay residuals when they do that. Yeah, I didn't know that at the time. They could have not sent me the money, and I'd have been happy.
You never know.
I didn't know. And I got a check.
It'd have been just a good story.
Yeah, I got a check one time from a recording company in New York City.
He's getting a knife out for a thing, not to
I'm gonna do a little surgery on my
Yeah,
shirt
you're not
here.
gonna attack me here.
No, I don't ever stick anybody unless they want to be stuck.
Oh, that's a razor, that's a.
No, it looks like that's a one-armed man's knife.
Is that a one?
This edge right here, you can hang it in the seam of your clothes. After the Civil War, they came out with this. And I can't do it that way, but they'd hang it in a seam and pull the blade open. When they didn't have a second arm to,
okay.
that's what that's called. It's named the Sarge. I don't know who makes it, but it's a good knife. Anyway, what was I saying? What was I telling?
Well, you're asking me to go back and remember too.
That's asking a lot, isn't it?
Remember, I'm only 5 months in between us. You were talking about Greenland, and then you were talking about getting back, and
We traveled on the road.
that's right. You're talking about sending money.
Yeah, I sent money home from Greenland. And when we got back from there, that's when we couldn't book a show after we completed that trip.
Yeah,
That's when bluegrass was just
hot.
on the wane terribly. Even Flat and Scruggs were struggling. They were the most famous group of bluegrass. at
They
that
were,
time.
yeah.
Yeah. And
See, I can remember back then too.
yeah, well, see, I knew Earl Scruggs. I went to his house and 2 or 3 times, and I spent some time with him when I was just learning the banjo. I wrangled an invitation to his house because he was interested in art. Well, I was an artist of sort. And they were doing a show here in the county at one of the local schools years ago. It's just like I had just started, got my first banjo, paid $34 for it out of Spiegel catalog. But I was trying to learn to play it, and I heard that Flat and Scruggs were coming. And boy, me and a buddy of mine, Big John Morgan, we couldn't get there fast enough to see Flat and Scruggs. And at their intermission, they went down the school hall into a classroom, and they were taking a break in there. And Big John, I say Big John, he's 6'8½". He's a big old boy.
Whoa, he is.
We walked in the room and struck up a conversation with Earl Scruggs. He was sitting there at a table, whittling on something. And I'll show you what he was doing. A trick I learned from him. This is the kind of thumb pick he used. And what he was doing was sitting there with his knife, cutting grooves inside that thumb pick. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Cutting grooves in my picks so my hand gets sweaty, it doesn't slip off." I said, "Oh." So I've done that ever since. If you put that on your thumb, you can feel those grooves. Just slide it on there. Feel those grooves in the bottom?
Yeah.
That keeps it from slipping. And I said, by golly, it's good enough for Earl, it's good enough for me. And then later on, I wrangled an invitation to his house because of his interest in art. He found out I was an artist of sorts.
What are you, painter or
Yeah.
a wood carver? Or?
No, I have a nephew that's an excellent wood carver. And I've got a nephew that's an excellent artist. He won the duck stamp competition in Ohio and Illinois both the same year.
Whoa.
He's a great artist. Waterfowl, that's his thing. And his brother carves ducks and does a beautiful job. I don't have one out here right now. But anyway, I was talking to Earl about the paintings on their album covers. A man named Thomas B. Allen had painted, and they were kind of, I won't call them futuristic, but they were a little bit, what's the word I'm looking for? They weren't true, they were, what's that word, doggone it?
You're asking me a word on painting.
Yeah,
My wife.
it's not the true thing, but it's a,
Caricature of it?
not really a caricature either, but kind of
That's the
is.
kind of word we're looking for.
Yeah, something like that. But anyway, I was talking to him about those paintings, and he said, "Do you know anything about art?" I said, "Well, yeah, I do a little." "Do you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Are you ever in Nashville?" And I said, "Yeah, I wasn't, but I knew I was going to be if he invited me." And I said, "Yeah." he said, next time you're down there, look me up. He said, I've got all those paintings at home. And I had a lot of questions I'd like to ask you about those paintings. He said, they're this big. And of course they had to be big, and then they reduced them down to the album size. And so that summer I went to work helping my grandfather and my uncle gather corn down here in the bottom, just when you picked it by hand, threw it in the wagon.
Yep.
And I had the down row. The wagon runs over one row, and somebody gathers the corn on two rows beside of it. And I always got the down row, which I had to do bending over and get a lot of cockleburrs. It's a rough job, but I'd do it. And then I would haul that to a neighbor's crib and take a scoop shovel and throw it up in his crib and save my money doing that fall. And my dad, he loaned me his car. He had a black 58 Chevy. That's the second one I wrecked. And he loaned me his car to go to Nashville in one weekend. And he bought me a new sports coat. I remember that. He didn't want me to go there looking like some redneck, you know. So he bought me a new sports coat. It was in November. It's beautiful coat, nice. And so they were encouraging me, you know, in the music. They never discouraged me. And I had a truck driver friend. I hang out at that truck stop every night, and he'd come in one night going to St. Louis, and the next night back to Nashville. And he kept asking me to come home with him sometime, spend the weekend. He said, I want you to meet my wife and my kids, and we'll just have a big time. And so one night I asked him, when he was in there, I said, Radio, we called him Radio Dixie because he talked more than I do. I said, Radio, is that invitation to your house still open? Yes, sir, buddy, when do you want to come? I said, what about Saturday? What about Friday? He said, you know what time I come through here? He said, you be here ready to go, and you can just go right with me. Well, at the time, my dad loaned me his car, so I didn't have to ride in the semi. I'd ridden one to St. Louis and back. That's a rough ride. But anyway,
semis back then were, now they're comfortable.
Yeah, I know they are now, but this was an old cab over Mac that I rode to St. Louis. It beats you to death. But anyway, he was driving his truck, and I said, I'm not going to ride in the truck with you. I've got my car. Okay, he said, you just get behind me, and I'll take you right there. I said, you'll have to, because I don't know where I'm going. I'd never driven in Nashville in my life. And
there wasn't on 24.
No, there was no 24 then.
I know.
Right down old 41A from Hopkinsville. But anyway, I stayed so close to him. We got to the truck terminal in Nashville. He said, man, I didn't see you since we left the truck stop. He said, you were so close on my... I said, I didn't want to get lost.
That's
I didn't know where I was
right.
going. He said, well. So then he drove my car over to his house, and we went over there, and I met his family, very nice. And we got out the next morning, which was Saturday, and he went to a gas station in Madison, Tennessee. I knew Earl lived in the neighborhood of Madison, so the outskirt of Nashville. He stopped at a gas station. He had this real southern drawl. He said, say, fella, where does this Scruggs man live to pick that old banjo? And he said, you go right up Old Hickory here and turn left on Donna Drive. I said, that rings a bell. I know he lives on Donna Drive, because I'd seen his address somewhere. But anyway, we went and found his house. But I didn't stop. We came back. I found out where he was, and we went back. And the radio took me downtown to the Grand Ole Opry that night and let me out. He said, now you call me when you get done. I'll come get you when the show's over. So I did, and I reintroduced myself to Earl when he came in that night. He said, yeah, you going to be in town tomorrow? And I said, yes, sir. You know where I live? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, he said, call in the morning, make sure we're up, because he said sometimes on Sunday morning we sleep late after traveling 2,500 miles every week, and they did that. So I called him the next morning. Yes, sir. He said, Louis, just putting on a pot of coffee. Come on. And I drove over by myself. I remembered how to get there. And I knocked on his front door, and he came to the door, and he said, traveling alone? I said, yes, sir. Come on in. Louis got some coffee made back here. He took me through his living room where I met two of his sons, Randy and Gary. Stevie was back in the house somewhere, probably still in bed. He was little. We went in Earl's den and sat down. And we started talking about those paintings, and he brought me out painting. Now, why did he do this? Why did he do that? And I'd say, well, I said, that's called artistic license. He said, what? I said, well, he's taking liberties because he doesn't know exactly what it's supposed to look like, and this is not a realistic painting anyway. It's kind of a abstract thing. And I said, he didn't know exactly how a banjo neck was shaped right there. So he just drew what he pictured it as, and that's called taking artistic license. I said, they can do that when they're as big artists as he is. Oh, I never heard of that. I'm glad you... Well, I got talking to him about that. He said, you do art? Well, I said, yeah. I used to draw caricatures of you and Lester Flatt. You did? I said, yeah, just for fun. He said, could you draw me one right now? I said, well, absolutely. Let me bring him a piece of paper and a pen or pencil. And she did, and I sat there and I drew a sketch of him. And lo and behold, years later, he came out with a big book called, it was on banjo instructions and his life story, Earl, Scruggs, and the 5-string banjo. And those caricatures, or identical ones, were all scattered through that book that I had drawn of him. I don't know if they were copies of mine, but they're exactly like the ones I drew.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, well, if you use them, so what? I don't want anything for it. I'm just honored that he liked them that way.
That is sure nice.
But anyway, he put out a second edition of that book, and they're not in there. But that was pretty exciting. And I drew those pictures. He thought that was, he said, look at this, Louise. He just sat there and just did, and said, look, you can tell it's me. I drew his hat angle just like he wore it, and a gap in his teeth, and the shape of his ears and everything. Oh, that just tickled him some. He said, can you do Lester? I said, yeah, I drew one of Lester. He kept them. He said, do you mind if I keep these? I said, well, I'd be honored for you to keep them. And so I kept in touch with him off and on through the years, but some of my students, the 3 that I told you about that wrote the story about me, they went over to a bluegrass festival in Missouri one time. And Earl was there. He was kind of the drawing card over there. And they were going through the autograph line, and they bought this new banjo head, the drum head part of the banjo, and to get him to sign it. And they went up to the autograph table where he was and laid that down there and said, Earl, do you know a man named Scotty Henson? He said, he looked up and said, is he a banjo teacher? I said, yes, sir. He said, yeah, I know him. And that's all he said. And he just wrote Earl Scruggs. And I've got it put up in there somewhere. But years ago, I got his autograph on my first banjo. He wrote it in pencil because nobody had a pen. And I got home and varnished over it so it wouldn't get rubbed off. And it's in there somewhere.
Oh,
now, on it, he wrote, kindest regards, Earl Scruggs.
That's nice. In
small letters. And this one, he wrote Earl Scruggs pretty big on the new banjo head. They gave it to me. And then they were taking lessons from me, one banjo, one mandolin, one guitar. And they formed them a little band and got some bookings around. And they wrote that story about me, the banjo player did primarily. And sent it to Bluegrass Unlimited, and they published it.
That's so great.
Yeah, and they had my picture standing on this porch, holding my banjo. Yeah, that was quite an honor. I don't know where that...
You got a whole bunch of stuff around here. It's just sort of like, I don't know where it's at. Stuff.
Yeah, I do that. The only thing I know where it's at for sure is my wife. She's in the house.
She makes sure you know where she's at.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes,
she's a dandy. She was a Yankee, come down here, born and raised in Detroit over on the east side.
Wow.
And her mother originally was from this part of the country. And her dad, like so many others around here, had moved north to find work. And when she was 8 years old, they took her up there. So she met my father-in-law, who was a Canadian. His first wife had gotten killed in a car wreck, I think. And he had left Canada and moved to Detroit, probably to find work. And they married, and this is their only child. She was their only child. And her dad was in his 90s. He fell and broke his neck. They lived here in town then. And he fell and broke his neck, and took 9 days for that to kill him. He was a tough old bird.
Wow.
But he was a good man. Her mother's in the rest home now. She's 95 now. My mother passed away in January. She was across the hall. She was 97.
Whoa.
And I'm 72, and that's about as far as I'll ever get, probably. My dad died younger than I am now.
You never know.
Yeah. My brother.
Every day is a new day.
My brother will be 80 in next July, but he's in good shape.
You never know.
He has arthritis, but I mean his vitals are good. But anyway, he was a great guitar player too in his day. My dad thumped on one, and I remember there used to be a show in Benton, at the old theater building, which is long gone now. The building's there, but there's offices in it now. They converted it to an office building, but there was an old theater, and the man who owned it was a Speaker of the House of Representatives for the state of Kentucky eventually. But he started out owning several radio stations, one in Benton, one down Ripley, Tennessee, one over in Missouri. And on Saturdays at his movie theater, he had what they called I think just a jamboree. And it was carried by a radio station over in Graves Country because there was no radio station in Benton at that time. So they had a hookup with a radio station in Mayfield, and they broadcast his live show from the theater. And anybody who wanted to come and play on that stage could do it. And I remember one day in the old house where I was raised, my dad was sitting out on the front porch just thumping on the guitar. He never did play much, but he could just thump a few chords. And for some reason I started singing this song, Hole in the Bottom of the Sea. And I sing it all the way through. He said, "Where'd you learn that?" I said, "I don't know." And I don't know. To this day I don't know where I learned it. But I do know there was a couple of guys, Lonzo and Oscar, used to sing it on the Grand Ole Opry. And if I didn't learn it from them, I had no idea, but I knew the whole thing. Well, he got so excited when I sung that whole song. I was just 7 years old. He called my mother out there, and he said, "Mildred, come here." He said, "You got to hear this." She came out on the porch and said, "What?" He said, "Sing that song for your mama." And so I sung it again. "Oh," she said, "we got to go up to my mama's and let her hear you do this." I said, "That'll take her to death." So they loaded me in the car, and right down here there was an old house long gone now, where my grandparents lived. They took me down there, and wish the phone would ring every now and then. Hello? Okay. Okay, I'll come in and get it just in a minute. Yeah, a little. Yeah, I will. Okay, I will, just in a minute. Okay, thanks. Bye. She reminded me it's time for my medicine.
Okay.
But anyway, I performed on that Saturday jamboree. My dad played the guitar and backed me up. He was more scared than I was. I didn't know enough to be scared. And that was my first time ever on radio when I was 7. And then I wasn't on anymore till I was 19 or 20 at a local talent contest, which I won by default and nobody else showed up. And started at me on television after that. It's been a long line of picking and grinning, I guess.
That's awful.
Yeah. It was all fun. I don't have any regrets. It's my life. I've done things I regret. It was stupid. I was thinking of one.
Well, if you don't know how well you do some of the good things if you don't do the bad things.
Well, I guess. But I was thinking yesterday coming across these river bottoms from Benton. I can remember one time Dad had a 55 Chevrolet before I wrecked it. I was just learning to drive, and I started driving that old 55. He left it to me on Saturday night. I'd go to skating rink at Benton or somewhere. And I had a buddy live down here, and he was driving his dad's car. And we were going to meet at the skating rink at Benton. We each drove our dad's cars. And I remember he had driven part of the way to town and backed in a little side road down there, just to hide and wait for me to go by. And when I went by him, I'll never forget that. I said to history, dumb, dumb, dumb. I was doing 105 miles an hour when I went through that bottoms and those narrow bridges and a deer. Of course, back then there weren't any deer around here. And I passed him, and I remember seeing something to my side when I went by as fast as I didn't have time to see what it was. And I went over to the skating rink, and he finally pulled in. He said, "How fast were you going a while ago?" I said, "Well, I was sitting on 105 when I said, "Was you using that back road, side road?" He said, "Yeah." And he said, "Zoom, you just went by like that." I said, "I was sitting on 105. And I was proud of it then, but I was so dumb to do things like that. I've taken chances. I remember one time at the water tower at Ken Lake State Park, great big tall tank with a banister around the top and stairs around it. Me and two friends were up on top of that tower, and I hung over that rail upside down by my knees. My head everything. I was 100 feet from the ground. If I'd have slipped, wouldn't have been any history of Scotty Henson. It would have ended right there. Dumb things like that. You know, boys do things. They take chances. They just don't think.
Part of our lives.
Yeah.
The ones that make it to 72, right?
Yeah, so far. So far they do.
Okay, well, I'm going to let you go take your medicine, and I'll put away my equipment.
Okay.
And I'll see you back out here when I should have it all away by then.
Okay.
And thank you so much, and we can talk about some other things when you get back.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Old Men Stories, one more day with country old men.